Next, from the Union League Club of Chicago, U.S. Representative from Michigan Mike Rogers, who serves as the chairman of the House Select Committee on Intelligence, delivers an address about the global threats and geopolitical challenges facing the United States and its allies. This runs about 1 hour.
Well, gosh, after that wonderful introduction, I'm not saying anything because I can only go downhill from here. I appreciate it. Actually, I was going to start this morning by telling you what a magnificent, wonderful, maybe the best FBI agent to ever walk the streets of Chicago. And then my old boss showed up. So now, there is no way in God's green earth I can get away with that. And it's great to see you, Bob. I have to tell you a quick story. The first time I had to sit in his office. Now, I'm a brick agent, right? I'm the guy that's supposed to be as far away from the ASAC as you can possibly get. You don't want to get called into the principal's office. And I was volunteering for everything. I was a new guy. I was going to do everything. If there was something bad happening and we were there, the FBI, I was going to be there. So I don't care if it was nights, weekends. I didn't care. So I had to borrow a car. We were doing a big drug arrest. They had an undercover agent working in this particular place, and we needed a kind of a herd of FBI agents to scream down the street and screech to a halt and run up to the door and scream FBI and all that good stuff, right? And that's, when you're a young agent, that's what you sign up for, right? So I'm in. But I was so new, I didn't have a car. I had to go around and beg all the older agents, like, please let me borrow your car this weekend, your FBI car. So I talked the guy into it, and it was a pretty nice car. It's pretty new, had about 9,000 miles on it. And I get in the car and we go out there and we get our brief and I'm ready and I got my jacket. They want me to actually use my sledgehammer to kick in the door. I'm thinking, oh boy, this is good. I got training for this. I'm ready to go. So we're going down and I'm listening to the brief, and it's 2 houses from the intersection, and you want to make sure you stop in this certain spot right in the intersection. You're going to get, if you have to go a little faster, there's a code word for that. If you got to go a little slower to roll up, that's a code word for that. So we're ready, and I'm in the car. This is my first door. I am the king as an FBI agent. I am so excited. And the call goes up, let's go, we're moving, so we're flying down this street. And then all of a sudden they come in and say, offer the code that, hey, we've got to get there in a hurry. They think they understand something's happening. So we're all flying down this street. And I look at the intersection and I count, 2 houses on the other side of the intersection, thinking, all right, I can slow this down by then. One small problem. The house was 2 houses this side of the intersection. Oh yeah, you know where that's going. So this brand new Delta 88 Oldsmobile with 9,000 miles proceeded to go into the back of another FBI car as he stopped in the appropriate place. Matter of fact, I hit it so hard my sledgehammer, I was in the back seat, went through my windshield and into the back windshield of his car. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, exactly right. That's how you got the conference? Yeah, exactly. I figured this FBI thing probably is not going to work out for me. I better go find something. Luckily, it worked out. I got the hammer out and I smashed it. And I thought I was very funny at this time, so I bring in to turn the car on Monday. I was going to bring it back to the agent, and I had a little piece of the grill, and I attached the key to it, and I put it on his desk. And he said, well, what's that? And I said, that's pretty much what's left of your car. So, hey, thanks. Really appreciate that. I got to go now. And that's when you get invited to see the principal in the office. But thanks, Bob, for not throwing me out. Give me a break. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I was really going to tell you one of the great stories, how I solved crime, pretty much stopped it in its tracks, but it really stinks when your boss shows up. First of all, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. And anywhere you get a warm welcome as a member of Congress is a good day, right? My father now says, I've got 5 boys, 4 turned out really good, and I've got 1 in Congress. So I'm eager to get at it. What I thought I'd do quickly, and I know we're on some time constraints, is I just want to go around the world a little bit, talk about the things that keep me up at night. As a matter of fact, I'm only 25 years old. Look what this job has done to me. And so we'll just kind of get a flavor of the challenges that we face. And I will tell you, and I've been on this committee for 10 years with the FBI, prior to that in the Army, I've never seen a threat matrix so serious as I have today. I do think there's consequences for it. I think this creeping isolationism in both parties, by the way, is going to be dangerous for us if we don't shake ourselves out of it. Think about where the Chinese are just for a minute. Most people don't realize this, but we are in a cyber war. Most Americans don't know it. maybe half of them don't believe it. We are in a cyber war with other nation states. And candidly, we're keeping afloat. Most days we're not winning. 85% of the networks in the United States are private sector networks. So the government goes out, and it's our job to beat on our intelligence services in a good way, to go out and collect information and come back with malicious source code, things that they can use to either penetrate systems for espionage or cyber destruction, which is the new turn of events here I want to talk about briefly, and protect themselves. And what we'd like to do is share it with the private sector. So here's the common myth that gets out there, that the NSA is monitoring those 85% of those private sector networks. They're not. It's against the law. They don't do it. So the problem is when our enemy, who controls their whole network, not enemy is a strong word, adversary, let me rephrase that for the camera. Yeah. So when, the Russians or the Chinese or the Iranians, or in this case now the North Koreans, who are gaining a capability that's a little bit surprising, when they engage in nation-state activities, the new turn of events here, and it started in 2007 when the Russians launched a cyber attack in Estonia and almost took them off the face of the map. Right? No gas was working. You couldn't get groceries. All the refrigeration shut down. Couldn't get any financial transactions to work. And they did that because they were honked off, which is a technical term, for removing a Soviet soldier or statue from their town square. And Putin didn't like it. He launched a very aggressive, disruptive cyber attack. That changed military planning forever. It is now part of military doctrine about preparing for disruptive attack and trying to develop a capability where we could do the same thing. We call it prepping the battlefield. It used to be artillery pieces and air power, and still some of that, but now it's cyber as well. So you think of China, who has invested time and energy in their military and intelligence services, who have stolen, we believe, $1 trillion in intellectual property from the United States. $1 trillion. We have one particular company, lost one set of blueprints, if you will, so they're very, very persistent. They'll get in, they'll wait. These are not smash and grab operations. They want to lurk around until they can find the most valuable piece of information that you store on your servers. And believe me, if China wants to get on your server, they're going to get on your server. That's what people, I think, are failing to grasp, the severity of this problem. Once they're in, they stole this particular set of blueprints. This is a great American manufacturing company. They took that back, repurposed it. That product is now in, I would argue, artificial competition in the marketplace. One theft, one set of blueprints, one American company, they believe it cost them 25,000 manufacturing jobs. 25,000 Americans aren't showing up to work with great jobs because of just one theft. It happens thousands and thousands of times a day, every day. If you have an intellectual economy like we do, an intellectual or an innovative economy like we do, and much of Europe does and a lot of Asia does, you have been victim of the Chinese economic espionage campaign. This is a problem. Now, we think they're the worst. We think other countries are now getting into it. We think the Russians, who have a capability higher than the Chinese, but they've been more interested in getting information, stealing information. Good old-fashioned spy versus spy work. What can they figure out? What can they steal of ours, our military equipment, our policymakers? What can they figure out that helps their cause? And they're engaged in this. The reason I wanted to bring this up in the first part of this morning is because there's been a turn of events that worries me a lot. And so let's go through the spectrum quickly. You have the guy in the basement who wants to steal your credit card and run down to Target and zip it up, right? That guy's bad. Remember the good old days when they would break into the school and try to change their grades? That's the good old days, isn't it? So you have that type of a criminal. Then now we have a more sophisticated criminal enterprise. Then the most sophisticated criminal enterprise, these are the folks that are going in trying to steal all that information that they can. The target folks, the people who went after super value, those kind of individuals who are trying to steal 1 million credit card numbers, trying to get your personal information. So they have those folks, and they are getting better and better. And by the way, the last round, they were using nation-state capability. So international organized crime using nation-state capability to steal credit cards, your personal information, anything they could do to make a buck. Then you have the nation-state capability, which is growing. China, cyber espionage, they clearly have a military disruption and attack doctrine in their military. We know that, we see it. The Russians clearly have that. But we saw something interesting, according to public reports, that the Russians were engaged in doing something on our financial networks in New York. And here's where the bead of sweat gets on my forehead. That some believe that the Russians, who are suffering a little bit under sanctions, believe that they have the capability and can do a disruptive style attack in retaliation for economic sanctions. You cause me economic harm, I'll cause you economic harm. That is a new day in cyber warfare, if that in fact was the motivation. That's a new tactic and a new nation-state capability that they're willing to use for a political gain, not a military gain. That is troublesome, and it's in a big way troublesome. And we've seen what disruptive style attacks can be. The Iranians launched an attack on a company called Saudi Aramco. Saudi Aramco is the main place. They cleared all the transactions for oil and gas for Saudi Arabia. In the course of a few hours on a weekend, they took 30,000 computers at Saudi Aramco and made them paperweights. Very destructive. And it's not something you're going to unplug and replug in and reboot. They changed data, they manipulated data, they destroyed data. They almost took Saudi Aramco offline completely, where it would take months to try to even attempt to reconstruct what happened. Imagine if I didn't know if I owed you money, you owe me money, I got to go back and try to figure this out, and it's an international company. You can imagine what would happen. Think about if one of our banks, we have a bank that clears $8 trillion a day in transactions. Imagine if that bank goes down and I can't tell you that you owe me money or I owe you money. That's a danger. You want to talk about economic impact. We just saw that Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan have both had some, according to public reports, penetrations of a very senior level, nation-state capability penetrations. You have to start asking yourself why, and when are they willing to flip the switch? And what damage would it cause to the U.S. economy, really the global economy? We're there, unfortunately, and it is getting worse. We saw North Korea attack a bank in South Korea with a cyber attack. It was pretty rudimentary, wasn't very successful, but it was at a level higher than we anticipated that they had in capability. We now know that the terrorist organizations who do not have this capability have been recruiting people openly to get this capability. Think of the low cost and the high impact. Pretty dangerous stuff. Now, if that doesn't, by the way, drinks will be served after my briefing. And I just want to quickly go around the world. So now you see China, who has invested 10% every year into their military development since 1979. And our number one and two costs for our U.S. military, number one is personnel, and number two is healthcare. They don't have the same constraints. So you think of a 10% increase year over year since 1979. And here's what they did. Brilliant. One of the things that we project power, or the way we project power, is by having a blue water Navy that can deploy and be gone for a very long time. And that is our projection of power. And when they show up, and this is also a technical military term, so forgive me, when that big ship shows up, that is one big can of whoop-ass. That's a technical term, I'm just repeating it for you here today. That's the way we kind of get at least recognized in the world as one of the leading powers, and can bring some hurt or some help depending on who you are and what you're doing. We do that based on a whole bunch of technical advantages that we have provided over the years, and one of that was the fact that space was uncontested. We operated in space absolutely uncontested, the United States of America, and that helps. That helps our accuracy, it helps our weapon systems, it helps our deployment, it helps our Navy get where it needs to go, all of that. Well, it is no longer uncontested space. The Chinese have launched a very sophisticated, back in late 2007, very sophisticated missile system that took out a satellite. Think of that, flying at 30,000 miles an hour around the globe. Hit it, put a whole bunch of debris out there, which was really not helpful. But it changed the game forever. They're also launching satellites that have offensive capability in space. Changed the game forever. Now, the Russians just launched, and by the way, the Chinese launched, doubled their number of quiet submarines in their fleet, and they invested in a technology that is very dangerous to our carrier groups, very dangerous. Gives us all a little pause when thinking about how sophisticated this certain weapon system is, and can we defeat it, and how do we defeat it. Had a lot of smart people trying to figure this out. So people who said, why do we worry about a country that is, has one aircraft carrier? Why do we worry? Think about the strategy they used in the last 20 years. They have gone after every strength of the United States. They've also said within the last 2 years they don't want the Blue Water Navy of the United States in the South China Sea. They certainly have seen an opportunity here. I think they think America is on the withdraw. They've intimidated Vietnam, Japan, the Philippines, Indonesia. They're saying that their territorial waters are bigger. They're claiming these islands that we would call rocks as their territorial boundaries, and are quickly and very sophisticatedly pushing out the envelope. They're on their second carrier. The Russians have launched a new series of very sophisticated nuclear submarines. I hadn't seen that since probably late 1980s. They've spent some modernization on their force. See some of their special forces capability operating now in eastern Ukraine. They call them little green men, who have been very impactful about one of Putin's aims was to make sure that Ukraine didn't go west, both in NATO and economically. That's a win for him. He got both. Anybody willing to go and invest in eastern Ukraine right now? Right? Not going to happen. Same with Georgia. He wanted them out. He didn't want them in NATO. He invaded Georgia in 2008. Still holds 20% of their land and is reinforcing it. He's building permanent military structures there, which, if you recall, in 2008, he said this was only temporary. And they're reinforcing it with some of the best equipment that they can produce and move in to the country of Georgia. It was, and some people say, well, I don't get it. He acts like a thug in his 21st century, and scratch your head. If you look at his strategic aim, and what he stated a few years ago that his aim was to make sure Georgia wasn't in NATO, Ukraine wasn't in NATO, that they had no real potential for Western investment, and push back on missile defense. Remember, the administration unilaterally pulled out the forward deployed missile defense system in both Poland and the Czech Republic. I happened to be there. And why these things I think are so important, and why we have to have this public debate and discussion on why smart engagement should be the rule of the day. I went to Poland right after that particular episode, and you can imagine the Poles were not, let's just say, amused. They actually was not on our itinerary. They threw me on a helicopter. Well, they invited me on a helicopter. We flew down to Warsaw, and they walked me the battlefield area where the Russians were across the river in World War II. Where they were encouraging the Poles to rise up against the Nazis in Warsaw. And the Russians at that time told them, if you do that, if you rise up against the Nazis, we'll come across the river. We'll help you. So they had it all coordinated and planned. And by the way, when he's talking, you can see him, his lips quivering. He lost relatives. I mean, this to us, World War II is a long way away. To them, this is very personal and very close. And he said, and when we did that, the Russians melted away in the middle of the night and left, and we got slaughtered. And he looked at me and he said, we've been through this before, and we will not allow a friend to turn their back on us again. Wow. Tell me that these little things don't have big consequences in the world. We yawned, we didn't think about it. The president didn't say much about it, moved on smartly. America, I'm not even sure, understood what happened. But we're having some very interesting difficulties trying to realign and restrap up with what is a great American ally in Poland. I had the great fortune of going to Moscow the following day to have a discussion on missile defense. Obviously, I wasn't aware of the other plan. So we tried to do two things. We were there to talk about missile defense and a port of call in Vladivostok, or Navy. Neither one went very well. Cut to the chase. I mean, by the way, this was the single largest human being I've ever seen in my life, this Russian. Huge. His hat didn't even fit on his head. It was so big. I wasn't going to say anything about his hat not fitting, by the way. I did learn that much in the FBI. So at the end of it, this guy gets up. Obviously, neither one of those discussions went very well. And he said, "Can I see you in the library?" And I won't do my Russian accent, it's really bad, but I said, "Yeah, sure." So he puts his arm around my shoulder and his hand hits my chest, and it's about the size of that pastry plate. And we're walking in the library and I'm thinking, you know, I've seen this movie. I don't think this works out all that well for me. So we get in the library and he says, "You know, it's great to finally see that America is a nation in decline. And we've been through it, so we'll give you all the advice and counsel that you can take." Yeah, pretty hard to take. If he wasn't that big, I might have. Probably not. But when we make decisions internationally, it has consequences that reverberate and make other nations make decisions. I don't believe it's a coincidence that China has decided in the last 2 years to expand their territorial waters. I don't believe it's a coincidence that Putin decides to take Crimea and disrupt eastern Ukraine, really without a lot of consequence. I don't think it's a coincidence that Iran, who has taken our cash in the last 2 rounds of Iranian negotiation and still is pursuing enrichment capability in Iran. I don't believe it's a coincidence that we have ISIS, who is now, or ISIL, or Daesh, as the Europeans would call them, or the folks from the Middle East, now holds territory the size of Indiana and is purposely threatening the United States, using beheading videos as propaganda both for recruiting and intimidation of the West. I just don't believe that pulling back from the world in any way and saying it's too hard and it's too difficult is the right answer for the United States. If you want to see what the world looks like when the U.S. withdraws from the world stage, turn on your TV. That is the problem, that when we're going to have to deal with this, this isn't a partisan thing. Both parties have this problem right now, where it's just easier to go home and say, too hard, coming home, won't impact us. The problem is, it does and it will impact us. That's what I'm worried about, significantly worried about. You know, there was a pretty senior level meeting in London. 2 U.S. officials, very senior U.S. officials, show up to have this discussion on, actually it was about Libya. And you see what happened in Libya today. It's collapsing, these extremist groups fighting for control. Ransoms across northern Africa are on the way up for kidnappings. And at one of this part of the meeting, the envoy from Libya, in a moment of frustration, said, "That's it. You need to understand something. For those who do not believe in the Prophet Muhammad, you're sinners. And we have the right and obligation to seek tribute and ransom, and we will." That was 1785. That was John Adams and a guy named Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson in 1803 decided that he was going to do something about that, and decided that our goods and services should go unmolested anywhere in the world, and he proceeded to build the foundation for the world's greatest blue water navy. This is a problem we've had for a very long time, and we have to, I think, kind of get our heads around the fact that you have to try to engage in the world to prevent problems for us, and disengagement will only cause us more problems. So I think I went over a little bit of my time allotted. I will close the yap and say thank you very much and open it up to questions.
I've got a microphone. Please stand, state your name and your very brief question, and I will hold on to the microphone.
Oh, you will?
Yeah, I will.
All right. Neil Ball, and that was a great report, lots for us to think about. I want to know more about the committee.
Yeah.
And first of all, why can't we know how much we spend in intelligence, which is a growing industry? What difference does it make if we know if the constitutional provision for reporting such things is followed? And secondly, to what extent does the committee give guidelines to operations in such sensitive, complex areas as assassination and that sort of thing? Does the committee do that, and if so, how?
Yeah, great question. So let me go just a brief overview of how the committee operates. So there are 16 agencies under the Intelligence Committee. That's both civilian and military. So Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, the tactical defensive collection posture, and then all of the civilian agencies, from NRO to the CIA to the FBI has a slice of that. All of that comes under the purview of the committee. So it is our function, and my job as chairman, to do all the oversight, and I have very professional staff that I use to help us do that, including members themselves. We do all the policy review, making sure that the policies that they're engaging in comport. And the last one, which makes this committee very unique, is that, and this is the Gang of Eight that Chris was talking about earlier. So some of the most sensitive things we do, covert action type activities, right? The CIA does not engage in assassinations, but we do other very sensitive things on behalf of the government to protect America. And so we have a real-time checkoff. So we both do the review of that operation. They have to come to us first. We do the review, and then we do regular monitoring of that particular operation. I really do think it's a pretty good system. Nothing's perfect, but we spend a tremendous amount of time. There's one certain operation I get briefed at least 3 days a week. My staff goes up every 2 weeks and then has a bigger meeting every month, and then I have a quarterly meeting with all of our members on the committee to go over it again. Because covert action, again, is the one thing gets you in trouble. Right? We've seen that movie before too. And so I think we spend, I can't tell you how much. It's really consuming. I mean, they put you down there in the big thick door and they kind of lock you in. I talk to myself a lot. I drool sometimes down there. But we spend a lot of time on this effort trying to make sure we get it right.
And on the expenditures?
Yeah, well, they have now declassified the top line. And to be candid, I opposed it. I believe, well, and I'll tell you why. So think about what the Chinese have been investing in. By the way, they don't tell us all. This is what we can put together, right? They're not telling us what they're spending. The Russians aren't telling us what they're spending. The Iranians certainly aren't telling us what they're spending, right? And now we're going to have to reconfigure the overhead architecture of the United States in order to protect the United States, protect soldiers and sailors and airmen in harm's way. I don't want them to know how much money we're spending trying to do that, so that they can you get some pretty smart people in a room, you can walk that back and try to figure out what technology we're trying to apply to what problem. I don't want them to do that. We're also very competitive on something called a supercomputer. You might know it as quantum computing. The race is on. Chinese think that they're ahead of us. They believe that they have a few-year advantage. I have spent a lot of time trying to make sure we don't lose this fight. Imagine that no nuclear code we could devise is not crackable. That's what's at stake. And if you can't come in second, because once you get it first, you'll always stay ahead of the bad guys, or in this case, the good guys. And so I sweat buckets every day trying to figure this out. I don't want them to understand how much money we're trying to apply to this problem. Because I'll spend money in research trying to figure out what they're applying to the problem. Right? And so I just think it's a kind of a dangerous game to tell them, you can tell a lot by how we disperse those funds. I believe in a constitutional republic, so if somebody crazy enough sent me to office, which shows you one of the weaknesses of the republic, to go to the office to make those kinds of decisions. And I took the oath and sat in that room. And my job is to give my industry to the people who sent me there to focus on this problem. I think it works pretty well. Again, nothing's perfect. So I know where all that money is. I just don't want the bad guys to know where all that money is. But now I think the top line unclassified number is $72 billion for this next year.
Okay.
My name is Biff Ruttenberg. Right now, the United States economy is the largest in the world. Fast forward several years, the Chinese economy is going to be larger. What happens when that day comes?
Yeah, this is a great intellectual property. If we're ever going to have the opportunity to change their behavior, I would love to see them as good world citizens participating in the free market economy with respect for the rule of law when it comes to intellectual property. That's a good day, right? Competition, good. The problem is, even in their last plenary session, they said, this is the Chinese. We've stolen so much. We've gotten that part pretty good. Now we're going to try to figure out how we innovate off of what we've stolen. That's their goal in this 5 years. Which means they're going to continue to steal stuff because it works. When they get to the place where they become a consuming economy, it will be nearly impossible for us to have any leverage on the Chinese. And if we haven't stopped bad behavior by then, I guarantee you we will have no leverage to stop it moving forward. That's what I'm concerned about. So I don't, if their economy gets, so what? My argument is we're going to continue to innovate, we're going to change, but if we don't do something about, and this is not one of those things, and I talk to a lot of CEOs, say, yeah, but we'll out-innovate them anyway. Anytime they steal something, they advance their technology light years, 10 years, 20 years, right? So even if they say, oh, well, that's old. Yeah, but they stole something old, and now they're competing with you almost heel to heel. That doesn't hardly seem fair to me. So we've got to shake ourselves out of the gold rush of China and just say, listen, we want you to be good trading partners. That would be great. But you have to be a good trading partner. Theft is not an option. I just really worry we're not get that piece right by the time their economy becomes a consumer. As long as they're an export economy like they are, we have leverage, right? They got to sell us stuff, right? And we buy a lot of their stuff, right? They have to do that in order to maintain their economy. That's the one piece of leverage that we have, and I am not suggesting trade wars, but there are certain things that we can do, countervailing duties on products we know have been stolen based on intellectual property. And now that makes everybody nervous. But I'll tell you, if we don't do something pretty significant, you're never going to change, their behavior.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is John Bertram.
Hey, John.
Now, assuming that climate change is a reality, I know it's controversial, but let's assume it. The effect of that will be that climate change will have a great effect on food supply and water supply. What is the effect of changes in food and water on nations and how they live together, and what's ahead?
Yeah. Well, the good news about this is the Earth has been in climate change since its very existence, right? So it's kind of sometimes it got real cold and sometimes it got warm. The dinosaurs did not like the chilly effect, apparently. It didn't work out that well for them. But the Earth has been changing in that way. And so when you go back and try to look at the numbers and try to take the emotion out of the debate of climate change, in periods of warmer weather, and this has happened before, actually food production goes up, right? Why? Because it's warmer weather in more places, longer growing season. Made sense. So we try to look at some of this impact, droughts and other things, because it is cyclical. I think the problem with this whole debate is we never quite get to the scientific discussion about, the climate does change. It has for thousands and thousands of years. The whole problem with that is people want to focus that on a particular problem set, which causes immeasurable economic harm, especially to the United States. Now, I understand why the rest of the world thinks that's a good idea, because they're not slowing down. But I don't think it's helpful to the economic prosperity of the United States and our ability to continue to be the single force for good in the world today. So my whole thing with this is we do study it. We look at pockets of change. We look, you're going to have droughts. They had droughts 1,000 years ago. We're going to have rainy seasons. They had rainy seasons 1,000 years ago. We're going to have really cold winter this winter. They've had really cold winters for thousands of years. So we just have to be careful about understanding where we are in this whole picture. Sometimes I think we give ourselves far too much credit for being able to impact Mother Earth in a way that she can't handle it. So again, if we ever get to that point, I hope they do. I hope they kind of remove this, you're either a knuckle dragger, don't believe in global warming, or you're an enlightened soul and believe in, global warming. What a silly place for us to be. We're going to have to deal with pockets of long-term weather impacts all over the world, including droughts in Africa that will roll through at some point. I guarantee you it will happen. They're also going to have really great production years. How do we make sure that we can kind of fit our policies to fit what the reality is of the Farmer's Almanac, right? If that makes sense.
Here we go.
Good morning. My name is Jay Probst. My question concerns the rise of ISIS to power. And was it, or has it been a huge intelligence failure on the part of the U.S. to leave the amount of weaponry that we left in that part of the world and not recognizing that ISIS could have accomplished what they have with our weapons? And if so, what are we doing about it to assure that this won't happen again?
Yeah, great question. So let me, if I can, real quickly try to walk through the history of how we got right here with ISIL or ISIS or Daesh, whatever you want to call them. So in right about 2004, if you remember a guy named Zarqawi, who was, if you remember that name, he was a brutal guy in the Sunni Triangle area of Iraq, and he was brutal, right? He was chopping arms off, chopping heads off, killing people, blowing up folks of different, not only different ethnic backgrounds, but different religious sects within the Muslim community, and of course trying to attack U.S. soldiers and Marines that were stationed there. So in the surge at that time, they went out and said, we've got to dismantle his organization. By 2006, he pledged support to Al-Qaeda. So he had the same end game, the same goal. They lined up perfectly. He wanted the prestige of the international acclaim to being an Al-Qaeda affiliate. He got it in 2006. The U.S. Effectively went in, and he's no longer with us, and put about 1,500 of his associates in prison that was run by the Iraqi security forces. Fast forward, U.S. withdraws pretty quickly, and then Maliki decides he's going to make some really pretty awful decisions, but he based it on the fact that he just lost his security footprint, so he was looking to Iran for help. Becomes a huge problem with him taking Sunni leaders out of his military and putting his own people as Sunnis. I mean, it was a mess. 1,500 of those associates escaped. They went to eastern Syria. Eastern Syria at that time had already been embroiled in the fight against Assad. It's a huge swath of ungoverned space, huge. But in that ungoverned space had some pretty good stuff. Syrian weapon caches, oil, and other weapon systems that give us all a little pause. And so that's how they started rising up. Then about 2 years ago, there's a fight between Zarqawi, the current leader of Al-Qaeda, and this guy named Baghdadi, who was very charismatic. He was one of those prisoners, by the way, who escaped. And now they're developing this pretty seasoned, hardened, battle-tested force. They're recruiting former Baathists from the Saddam army to convert them over to help them fight. So now they have a little military structure to themselves. And the fight was never about, if you saw in the press, it was, well, they were so brutal that Zawahiri, decided to tell them that they could no longer bear the mantle of Al-Qaeda. Now remember what a farce that is. Al-Qaeda is the ones that slit the throats of our pilots and our flight attendants and then flew those buildings to slaughter 3,000 people. We should get that out of our notion, out of our head, that there's any notion that this was about brutality. This was about control. And what happened was Baghdadi said, I have all these Western passport holders. I want to start sending them back to blow up stuff in America, in Europe, while we're fighting here, and I want to go back into Iraq. Zawahiri didn't want any part of it. That's what ended up, they rifted. So these guys had taken these weapon caches, now they have training. They are very sophisticated propagandaists when it comes to both recruiting and messaging on social media. Unbelievably good, and we should not underestimate their capability to reach out and touch someone. Bad way for us, good way for them. They go across the berm, they have wild success. The more they travel, the more equipment that they pick up. That equipment wasn't just necessarily left. And this notion that the Iraqi military, and I thought this was horribly unfortunate for the men and women who train these individuals, oh, they just melted away, $1 billion lost, you guys don't know what you're doing. At the time of this, when this fighting started, when they were coming across the berm, Maliki called his commanders, all of them, back to Baghdad to have a discussion. Well, they were all Shia-based, loyal Maliki folks that he had replaced. So now you have these soldiers who are standing there with no leadership, right? And they don't know what's going on. They know they didn't like the government because there was a little bit oppressive. And now they're standing there thinking, these guys are coming, they're talking about cutting heads off, I'm out, right? It's all about leadership. And so we lost that. When that part got lost, that army did melt away and they dropped their weapons. But so here's where we find ourselves today, that they continue to have this pipeline from the West, their propaganda machine. The equipment that they picked up, yes, it came from the Iraqis, a lot of it that we helped them acquire, but these were military units that were supposedly trained. And here's what happened. When we reinstated the old Sunni leadership on Sunni tribes out in the West, their fighting just went through the roof, right? They're fairly effective. And we have the Peshmerga, there's another great myth. They said, my God, the Peshmerga just melted away into the woodside. Well, the Peshmerga ran out of ammunition. They've been asking the United States for months leading up to it, we need some help here. You got to give us some beans and bullets or we're in trouble. And when you run out of ammunition, you strategically regather somewhere else. That's exactly what they did. And now you can see when they're fully equipped, they're, by the way, U.S. trained. These folks are doing really amazing things in the countryside. So I think it's important to put it in perspective where we are. And again, my argument was on the fact that we made the United States made some bad decisions. Just a unilateral pullout was a bad idea, right? That's when we were there, allowed Maliki to actually have an inclusive cabinet. As soon as we left, created a huge security vacuum, that all changed, right? That changed pretty significantly, pretty quickly. And when the Peshmerga for months were saying, please help us, they kept getting told, no, we're not doing that anymore, we're out. Huge mistake. I mean, just another huge mistake. And in Syria, when our Arab League partners, Sunni-led coalition came, I know they came and met with me as well, and said, hey, here's what we want from you all, because we see this growing problem in eastern Syria. Right? We don't like Assad, but we see this as a problem for us too. We would like intelligence, we would like defensive weapon systems, command and control, meaning they don't want our troops there, they just wanted the ability for us to help them understand how you control big units moving on a field of battle. Right? That's an important thing. Only the United States can probably provide that for them. And what we gave them? Nothing. We said, no, we're not getting involved. Now we have this huge problem that's striking the shores of the United States. This to me is, I hope we take a look at this from a perspective of learning as we go forward. We could do small and effective things early that prevent big and ugly things from happening. That part of the debate always gets lost in these things. And so it was not an intelligence failure. My committee actually had a formal request in 2013 to focus resources on this growing problem in eastern Syria. That's hard to argue that the intelligence community didn't know and didn't see it. The failure was the policy failure of saying, nope, I'm out. That's a problem for us. And we're paying a price for that, I argue. And we're going to have to do something about it. And by the way, we can't do this by remote control. I know it kind of soothes maybe our conscience a little bit that we fly planes and drop bombs, and that's okay, apparently. And we call them humanitarian bombing runs. And we ought to call it what it is. This is awful. It's hard. It's difficult. But these people want to cut our heads off and lay them in the street and take pictures of it. We shouldn't fool ourselves what that means. And that means, I believe, if we get involved earlier, even now, with our special capability forces, including intelligence forces, we can be far more, we can help the units that are fighting there, both Syrians, Peshmerga, Iraqis, be far more impactful. The longer we wait, the more this thing deteriorates. I'll guarantee you somebody's going to get a call and say we're going to need the 101st Airborne Division to go in and clean it up again. That would, to me, would be a colossal mistake if we allow that to happen. But the longer it goes, more people are showing up. I mean, we think now they have 25,000, think of that, 25,000 Western passport holders showing up. Now, either something bad's going to happen to them there, which I'm not sure I would be, I think that might be okay, or they're going to come home. And what we're finding is they're coming home. And here's the big switch that I want to talk about. I'm sorry this is a long question, but this to me is a very important change in their tactic. 14 people in Australia had self-radicalized, recruited, contacted ISIL recruiters, or Daesh recruiters, worked with them. They call up, say, we've got our money, we're ready to go, we'll fly to Turkey, you can get us down into Syria. That was their plan. And this is where the change happened. They said, you know what, we're getting plenty of folks. Okay, problem number one. Number two, we want you to randomly, don't plan this, drive around your cities, randomly grab people off the street, cut their heads off, videotape it, send it back. We're going to put this as a part of our campaign. And subsequent to that, right, now luckily the Australian, and I went to Australia to work through their intelligence services, they got a little bit of a lucky break here, stopped it. But now you see Canada, New York, there's arrests in France, Brussels, Germany, Spain. It's coming. And our services, domestic services here, we asked a lot of our FBI friends and colleagues, stop organized crime, white collar, child pornography, and oh, by the way, you're getting a wash in these people that are likely, a percentage of them likely to be a threat to the United States. Don't miss any of that. Right? Our resources are getting overtaxed here. So we're either going to make a decision that we're going to kind of pull the sheets back and get out of bed and deal with it like the United States of America. Can you imagine Roosevelt going down to the House of Representatives and said, yes, we agree that the imperialist Japanese for bombing Pearl Harbor is a problem. Here's the 3 things I'm not going to do to beat them. Or Churchill in the House of Commons, yes, we're getting V2 rocket bomb or V1 rocket bombs landing in London. Never give up, never give up. And by the way, here's the 2 things I won't do to beat the Germans. No, of course not. We've all agreed they're a problem. Now we should say, all right, what are we going to do to defeat them, to strategically defeat them? If we don't do that, my fear is this will get bigger and uglier. It's going to reach our shores, already has. Something bad's going to happen. We're going to have an incident like happened in Ottawa, somewhere else in the world here. And all going to turn our heads and go, well, how did this happen? Right? We know how it's going to happen. We're watching it develop. And I'll guarantee you one of the first things they'll say is, well, this was an intelligence failure. Nope. This was a willpower failure on behalf of the United States.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good morning. My name is Rob Mudd. I just returned from China on Tuesday, and I was over there for 13 days. And there's a contradiction. We talk about cyber warfare, yet there's 235,000 freshmen that came from China to the United States. Most of them are at our top computer programming schools. So we're exporting that knowledge to combat with us, yet what they can't duplicate is natural resources. They have none. They have no corn, they have no soybeans, they have no oil, they have no cattle, they have no pork, and they have no natural gas. So the Russians just do a deal on the pipeline for $400 billion, and Putin's making his deals. Why aren't we doing what they can't copy, and that's our natural resources?
Yeah.
Why aren't we going and having them be dependent upon us instead of Brazil or the Russians? There's a contradiction, and why don't we talk about it?
Yeah, well, we do try to talk about it. Matter of fact, I argue energy was the way to shut down Putin's movement early on. If we would have the courage to export liquefied natural gas, which we don't, we have export quotas on the country of, now we have fracking, we actually produce more oil than we can use. This is a good thing. This is a positive development in the world. And we should be able to allow certain exports. We could control the behavior greatly by taking ownership, of our own energy resources and then using them in commercial ways to take the bite out of somebody like Putin. Let me give you another scary statistic on China. And again, I am not a China basher at all. I love the trade agreement, but we're going to have an adult conversation about how to get them to be good global partners. They have more masters and PhDs in colleges today in STEM, science, technology, courses, than we have graduated and working in the United States of America.
That's a simple math problem.
Oh, that's a big math problem. Yeah, you need one big abacus to solve that problem, right? Yeah. No, well, and this is a huge problem, right? So the universities push back and say, and candidly, we've watched these universities, I happen to be I won't mention overseas in Europe, very distinguished university, who is completely penetrated. They were lining the stuff that they'd lost for intellectual property, but you ask them, well, what are you going to do about it? Well, they pay cash. That seems right. I don't know. The problem is we've got to shake ourselves out of that too. And you don't want to completely close it. I like the idea that somebody comes here, gets trained, sees America, sees what we're all about, sees our values, and then goes home, right? Likely that person tends to be more pro-Western. The problem with the government of China is they have rules on the book. There's law that if you're going to anywhere in the world and the intelligence service knocks on your door, you are legally obligated to cooperate 110%. So if they say you're going to steal 5 things at University X, you will steal 5 things that even if you're not a spy, you don't want to be a spy, you're just there to educate. And that is a cultural thing that we haven't wrapped our arms around. We're going to have to deal with this.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
I'm for cows. Well, but we do a lot of exports. But here's where China's been. This whole expansion in the South China Sea is about resources, and the reason they're all over Africa is about resources. And so one of the things that China knows is they don't want to be dependent on us, which is why they cut a deal with Russia, which is why they just cut a deal with Iran on some natural gas production in a region of the country. They don't care about sanctions or nuclear. They're very internal focused on their success, and they don't care if they hurt your feelings.
All right, we got 2 questions queued up, and we got to
Yes, sir.
get you out of here.
All right.
Somebody told us that. They were very authoritative.
Is this called getting the hook?
Yeah, sorry. Here we go. I'm holding the microphone. Please identify yourself.
I'm Charles Lipson.
Do you have any association with the university?
I direct the program on international politics, economics, and security. I have a non-cow related question. It's about Iran. And my question about Iran has 2 parts. The first is, given that we will have to give up to get any kind of comprehensive deal, significant relenting on sanctions, what's the bottom line on what you would have to see to make such a deal acceptable? And then the second part of that is there any major deal that would not require Senate approval or some kind of joint House and Senate approval? Because I'm concerned about the constitutional crisis that could arise if the president strikes a major deal and says it is not subject to any oversight by the legislative branch.
Yeah. There are certain things that he could do in that regard, especially if it's not a treaty-based solution. He can do that, just like they did with the secret negotiations. So this, for all of you who follow this stuff, the first word that should have scared you is that they had secret negotiations, right? That's a huge problem. It has caused us a huge problem with our Sunni-led nation Arab League partners. They are, every time I see them, I've never seen them so angry at the United States. It's caused a problem with our European partners. They were not amused, right? And so that told me that maybe your motives weren't all that good. If you don't want to talk about it publicly, what are you doing? What are you hiding here? And so part of the problem was, the president just had a philosophical difference. So in a bipartisan way, by the way, the House and the Senate passed these sanctions. The president originally threatened to veto them. So just think of where their mindset is. They're just a little different from those of us who've looked at this for a long time, right? And say, you don't really want to do that. You need to keep up the ratcheting. Well, we argued right when we got it really in a good spot, which is why I think they did secret negotiations. They didn't inform Congress, they didn't inform our allies, they told no one, and then walked out and said, hey, we got this great deal, we're stopping their nuclear weapon program. And the very next day, Iran said, thank you, the United States, you've allowed us to enrich uranium, right? Do you remember this?
Yes.
We would call that, well, in the FBI, we would call that a clue. That something bad may have happened. Yeah, exactly. And so we do worry about it, because one thing they needed was cash, and the pressure was finally reading the elites of Iran, who were really not suffering under the sanctions. The goal was, can we ratchet it up enough to start getting at the inner circle of these folks, so that they could walk in that meeting and go, hey, it stinks, right? This is awful. Why don't we do something here? And here's the most frustrating thing. The administration actually, on the back end of it, put a really good deal together with the UAE, right? It really is the gold standard of how you do nuclear enrichment negotiations. It's called 1, 2, 3. Very clever. And one of the things that it does is it allows enrichment to be removed and taken out of the country. So they have no collection of radiological material. They only get the functioning part of using it. They never even discussed it with Iran. So here, you can imagine the UAE who knocks on my door and says, well, okay, we're your friends, and they are. You tell us we can't do it. You go negotiate with my enemy and your enemy, and you allow them to enrich. What gives?
This is our closing question. All right.
Hi, I'm Blake Fleischer. I'm a student at the University of Chicago, and I wanted to ask you about the current rift with U.S.-Israeli relations, especially with the remarks from an official that came out from the White House regarding Prime Minister Netanyahu, and if you think there's any hope for a better relationship.
And what was
in the
that
future.
comment again?
Chicken poop.
Yeah, chicken shit.
Oh, okay. All right. This gets my blood pressure up a little bit on this particular case. So I've spent a lot of time in Israel and over the years and got to know their intelligence officials and defense officials, and it worries me a lot because I've seen this from the administration in the past, where they will use leaks to further their foreign policy aims. If you recall, the reason I find this so shocking, this comment, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they were basically implying from senior officials at the White House, which is shocking to me, that Netanyahu didn't have the courage to attack Iran when he had the opportunity, according to their framing of this conversation, in the pursuit of their nuclear weapons, and not attacking it in a general attack, but trying to disrupt their facilities for producing nuclear weapons. That's what they were trying to say. If you recall, right when Israel was beating that drum saying we have to do this because their capability is starting to concern us a lot, there were leaks in the paper about exactly how Israel was planning to do it. Do you remember this?
Yes.
It was shocking. I mean, it was shocking, including, by the way, an ally of ours and an ally of theirs who was implicated in the possibility of participating only in the refueling, which when you think, well, that's no big deal. It is a huge deal in that region. It exposed our ally in a way that I found unconscionable, and certainly Israel paid a pretty heavy price for that. So some notion that now some 28-year-old punk decides to make policy by talking to a press reporter and feeling how important they are has serious ramifications for both Israel's defense and our obligation to defend Israel. That's why. This is why I hate that. I mean, the first term of this president, they had some people with gravitas in the room, Leon Panetta and Gates and those people. That part's gone, it seems to me. And then you get to this. If there was any chicken, whatever, I have a feeling it happened at 1600 Pennsylvania, not in Netanyahu's place in Tel Aviv. I mean, I worry about that. We should not have our relationship this badly destroyed. It's going to take work. And whoever the next president is, and I don't care who it is, they're going to have a lot of repair work to do in our international relations, specifically with Israel. And we have to shake ourselves out of this notion, by the way, that, well, because Israel is better at defending themselves than Hamas is at hitting rockets into civilian centers, that's Israel's problem. They are firing missiles at civilian populations with the intent on killing civilians. And we have this Iron Dome program that we support and other things. Some notion that is Israel's fault because they're just better at stopping those than they are trying to find where those rockets are coming from is absolute nonsense. I've never heard of anything like it. And so this continued degradation, and I'll tell you, the Middle East, people in the Middle East, will make decisions based on what they think the relationship with Israel is. A strong relationship has done more for peace in the Middle East than you can possibly imagine. When you start showing weakness, or we're not with them, people will make decisions that we will all regret. That's that whole engagement thing I keep talking. This to me is the perfect example. Be a great class in your teach that next generation why engagement is a good thing. Thanks everybody, I really appreciate you having me.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.